Hello, everybody. This is Bennett Tchaikovsky. Welcome to our little presentation today here. We're going to be doing some process costing. So we're first going to start out with a weighted average question, and then we'll move over to do a FIFO question. So this presentation is copyright 2024 by Bennett Tchaikovsky. All rights are reserved. If you wish to use this or any part of it, you cannot do so without my prior authorization. More importantly, is that the material contained herein is that of myself, and any opinions I may express are those of my own and not of my employers or other affiliated organizations, including South Orange County Community College District and Irvine Valley College. So let's go ahead and get to it. So let's take a look at this over here. So ZI manufactures breakfast cereal and uses process costing to transfer costs between departments. On October 1st, 2026, they had 40,000 units in beginning inventory that were 70% complete with respect to materials and 60% complete with respect to conversion. In addition to the beginning inventory, we started and completed 600,000 units. The ending inventory consisted of 80,000 units that were 40% complete with respect to materials and 80% complete with respect to conversion. On October 1st, 2026, we had the following costs in its beginning inventory: 58 materials, 109,000 in conversion. During the month of October, we had 345,200 in material costs and 383,000 in conversion costs. So the thing that I want us to kind of remember here as we're going through and doing these problems is that when we're learning about, basically about process costing, is that we're dealing with mass production and going through and dealing with things as mass production as opposed to job order costing, which is really making things for the customer. We may have product that is not necessarily, fully complete with respect to we might have products that are not at the full stage of completion. Because we're dealing with mass production, there's a concept called equivalent units. And the equivalent units is essentially how we're going to figure out to get costs out of work in process materials and work in process conversion over here to our finished goods inventory. And when you kind of go through and think about this from, like a bigger picture perspective, what we're in all these process costing questions, we have over here, we have our beginning WIP materials, which we're told is, maybe make this a little bit smaller so I can, there we go. So we're told that our beginning work in process materials was at 58,000. The costs during the period for materials were 345,200. And then over here for conversion, remember, conversion refers to how we're basically taking the materials and converting them to the final product. That's typically going to consist of direct labor and factory overhead. So our beginning conversion costs were at 109. And then our costs during the period, the October material costs, and then over here, our October conversion costs. This is going to be 383,800. So what we're trying to go through and do in these different questions is we have these costs that are sitting over here in terms of materials. And what we're trying to do is how do we help these costs essentially transfer over to finished goods, right? So how do we get them from, how do we go through and get them, how do we get these costs that are sitting in our work in process accounts over to finished goods inventory. So that's really what we're trying to do with these questions. So the way we're going to go through and do it, and let me just see for kind of for fun. Perfect. Okay. So this is somebody else's YouTube video, or Eric Blazer, and this, I think this video came right out of a McGraw-Hill textbook, so that's what that looks like to me. So when we look at this, the concept of equivalent units, the best way to kind of go through and look at this is, well, if I have 100 units that are, say, 40% complete, this would be the same as 40 units that are 100% complete. So 100 times 0.4 is going to be 40, but that is where we're basically saying that these units are basically going to be the same as, those that are 100% complete. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we're doing weighted average process costing. First thing we have to go through and do is to figure out our equivalent units. Okay, so our equivalent units are coming from 3 different sources. We have beginning, we have started and completed, and then we have our ending. Now, what you're going to notice here for me, the way I do this, because this is an introduction to managerial accounting, and when you get up to upper division costs, they might kind of say stuff like, oh, well, we started this and we finished this, and you get all those other kind of stuff. So you may have to kind of basically back into the numbers, but I kind of lay it out like this because I think it's for somebody who's first trying to understand how cost accounting works. This is a great kind of way to kind of to start somebody off. So if I were to go through and look at this from a equivalent units perspective, it says over here on October 1st, I had 40,000 units in my beginning inventory. And we also started and completed 600,000 units. My ending units consisted of 80,000 units. Okay. Now, when we're talking about equivalent units, what you're going to notice here is that, well, we had beginning inventory, but it was not complete. In fact, it was only 70% complete with respect to materials and 60% complete with respect to conversion. For the ending inventory, it consisted of 80,000 units that were 40% complete with respect to materials and 80% complete with respect to conversion. However, when we're going through and doing this, so these are the equivalent units we have. We need to try to figure out what the equivalent units are for direct materials. And we also need to figure out our equivalent units for conversion. Remember, what conversion means, right, is basically is how we are going through and then basically going through and converting. How do we basically convert our materials to finished product? So over here, when we're doing weighted average, so under weighted average process costing, we assume that the beginning inventory, or I should say the beginning inventory, was made 100% complete during the period. That we completed them 100% during the period. Okay, so that's the main assumption we're using when we're going through and doing this. Okay. It's a methodology. It's weighted average process costing. So in terms of equivalent units, it's basically going to be 40,000 each, meaning that we worked on these 100% during the period. So when it comes to weighted average, right over here, if it says over here, it was only 70% complete with respect to materials and 60% complete with respect to conversion, we're just going to basically disregard this. We disregard the percent that the beginning inventory is complete and assume that the inventory was 100% completed during the period. Okay, so again, that's what we're going through and doing. So we disregard the beginning amount. Now, for whatever we started and completed, these are basically going to be done at 100%. So we started and completed, so this was fully done during the period. Now, for the ending, this is where we have to be careful. The percentages do matter. So it tells us here that ZI's ending inventory of 80,000 units was 40% complete with respect to materials. Now, because of the ending, is this 80,000 comparable to the 600,000? And the answer is no. Why is it not comparable? Because this was 100% completed. It was started and completed. So this was 100% completed during the period. But for this 80,000, this was only 40% complete. So what I need to think about is, well, 80,000 at 40% completion is the equivalent to 32,000 units at 100% completion. By taking 80 times 0.4, I get 32. This is 80,000 at 40% or 32,000 at 100%. By using this over here, I can now compare this number. These numbers are now comparable. Okay. So let's now go over here and take a look at the equivalent units for conversion. So the equivalent units, there were 80% complete. So what this is going to be 80,000 times 0.8 or 64,000. So 80,000 units at 80% is the same as 64,000 units at 100% completion. Because we're dealing with mass production, right? We're not making things for the customer like we were doing in job order costing, cereal, like any type of mass production, vodka, whatever it might be. So that's how we're going through and doing this. So my equivalent units for materials and my equivalent units for conversion, it's going to be 672,000 equivalent units. And then over here for conversion, so my equivalent units for direct materials, 672, equivalent units for conversion is going to be at 704. Now, this is the other big difference between these two. Remember, when we went through and made this assumption with the beginning inventory, why did we do this? Because we're doing weighted average process costing. What does this mean? Well, I'm trying to come up with my cost per equivalent unit for direct materials. So what I'm going to need to go through and do is I need to say over here, okay, my cost per equivalent unit for direct materials is going to be my beginning WIP materials plus my October materials cost divided by my total direct equivalent units for direct materials. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to go through and do. So what this is going to be is 58,000 plus 345,200 divided by 672,000, or 403,200 divided by 672,000, or 60 cents, which is going to be my cost per equivalent unit. Okay, so that's my cost per equivalent unit for direct materials, right? So again, my cost per equivalent unit for direct materials. I'm taking both the beginning, it's a weighted average, beginning plus my October's materials cost, which is 403,200. I am then going through and dividing this by my direct equivalent units for direct materials, which is going to be over here. I should have left it as it was. That's 672,000. Okay. Now, what about my cost per equivalent unit for conversion? So this is going to be my beginning conversion balance, my beginning WIP conversion, plus my October conversion costs. Remember, what's conversion? It was referring to direct labor and factory overhead. And I'm going to divide this by my equivalent units for conversion. So what this is going to be is 109 109,000 plus 383,800 or 492,800. 109 plus 383,800. And I'm dividing this by my equivalent units for conversion. When I go through and divide this through, I'm going to come up with an amount of 70 cents is my cost per equivalent unit for conversion. Okay. So what I've done so far is I've come up with my equivalent units under weighted average. Remember, the big thing for weighted average is we are going to disregard whatever percentage at the beginning inventory is complete and just assume it was 100%. Part of the reason why we're doing this is because we're including the beginning inventory costs right over here. That's why we're disregarding the percentage that beginning inventory was complete. So let's come over here and let's answer some more of the questions. So my cost per equivalent unit for the materials is going to be over here at 60 cents per unit. My cost per equivalent unit for the conversion is going to be at 70 cents per unit. Now, I need to go through and look over here is, well, I clearly finished product during the period. In fact, I finished 640,000 equivalent units for materials and 640,000 equivalent units for conversion. I finished those. So those should not be sitting in my materials accounts. Should not be sitting in my WIP materials or my WIP conversion. So what do? Well, if I went through over here and said 640,000 equivalent units, which is my beginning inventory plus the started and completed, times my cost per equivalent unit for materials, which we determined to be 60 cents. So this is going to be 640 times 0.6 or 384,000, right? So this is basically what came over from, and this is going to finished goods inventory. Okay. Now, when we go through and do this, right, my ending balance right over here in my work in process materials account is going to be subtract the smaller from the larger balance, leave the remainder on the larger side, or 19,200. Now, with these questions, there's always ways we can check our work. Extremely important. How do we check our work? Well, I sent 640,000 to finished goods. I have 32,000 left. If I take my ending inventory of 32,000 equivalent units and I multiply that by 0.6, what I'm going to get is 19,200. I'm balanced. So when you do these questions, you want to make sure you're checking your work, right? This is how you go through and do it. You can say, I can come up with the ending balance and then figure this out, or I can figure out how much I sent out and then do this part down here. But again, it's extremely important for you because I've seen students mess this up on exams. There's ways to check your work. Okay. We now know that the ending work in process account for direct materials is going to be 19,200. Now, for conversion, let's have some fun. Let's go through and have a good time. And we're going to do that by approaching this question a little bit differently. So, for example, right over here, if I use this kind of same process, the amount of my equivalent unit conversion, my ending inventory was 64,000. If I take 64,000 equivalent units conversion as my ending inventory and I multiply that by my cost per equivalent unit for conversion, I'm going to get 44,800. Okay. In order to get to 44,800, which is my ending inventory for conversion, I must have sent out 448,000 from WIP conversion to finished goods. How do I know that's right? Well, I sent out 640,000 units or 640,000 equivalent units for conversion times 0.7. If I take 64,000 times 0.7, excuse me, 640,000, I get 448,000. So I know I've done this question correctly. So coming over here, my finished goods is 832. All right. So in answering these other questions, my ending finished goods balance, 832. Ending work in process conversion is 44,800. Now, the next thing we could look at doing is just to check our work. Not required. There is something called total cost to be accounted for. What does this mean? Well, my ending WIP materials, ending WIP conversion, and my ending finished goods inventory, right? Or 19,2, 44,8, and then 832,000. This equals 896,000. When I compare this to my beginning WIP, my WIP costs, my beginning conversion, my conversion costs. So my beginning WIP over here was 58, 345.8, 109, 383.8. When I go through and I add these up, they equal out. Why did I just go through and do that? You do not, I'm not going to ask you to do this on an exam, but it is a way we can go through and further check our work. So it's always a good idea. The more ways you can check the work, in my opinion, the better. But this is weighted average process costing. Remember, we disregard the percentage of the beginning inventory when it comes to equivalent units, and we assume it's all 100% completed. And why are we doing that? It is because over here, I am including my beginning work in process materials costs, and I'm adding in my costs during the period. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Please, 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 thank you for watching. Appreciate you liking and subscribing to the channel. If there's any other content that you would like to come up and see, please feel free to leave a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Have a great day.